Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here and to meet you and to have the opportunity to speak to you. I had many functions and roles. Still, I have, because when you are in emeritus and retired, then they think that you have enough time to do other things. Which is not true, I can tell you. For example, I'm a judge still in the court of North Holland, but also in the Court of Appeal of The Hague. And there's a shortage of judges. So until 73, I have a lot of work. I am special advisor of the Ministry of Finance, where we have scandals, and that's about 3 days per week. I want to write. I'm writing on a book on Montaigne, etc. Indeed, I have some experience in the field of research integrity as chair of several committees. I was the chair of the committee, of course, on research integrity of Utrecht University, but also Tilburg University, and I chaired several ad hoc commissions several times in Amsterdam, in Rotterdam, Maastricht, and I forget a few maybe. And that's the last thing I want to say because that has to do something with my presentation of today. I have been chairing the Research Integrity Group. It's a policy group of LERU, a League of European Research Universities from Germany, Freiburg, München, and Heidelberg are member. 23 research universities work together, and I have been chairing for 12 years the policy group on research integrity. A few years ago, we came out with a report. It's on the website. It's an advice paper towards a research integrity culture. You can easily find it. Okay. What I would like to do today, I would like to look to what is happening in the academic world with regard to research integrity and try to highlight a few things. But to start with, 2001, I was asked to become a member of a special commission of the judiciary in the Netherlands to think about a code for the judiciary, a code of conduct. And after 1 year of discussions, we came up with a code. And it was one of my tasks to make a tour through the country, to talk about this code, to introduce it to the judges, and to have discussion on it. What do you think of this? Half of the judges, they came to the meetings that were organized, and most of them said, well, we don't need a code. We are always independent, impartial, and why having a code? Because then, if we would have a code, then people would think that we are not independent and impartial, not integer. So please, no code. 2 years later, after having handled a very, very complicated case that was also in the news, in the newspapers for the University of Utrecht, I took the initiative to organize a meeting with the rectors of the country. We have 10 universities, or 13 universities, I must say, also the technical universities. And there were 6 rectors at this meeting, only 6. One of them was very much for having a code and also developing permanent commissions, but the rest they thought it's not necessary. Of course, we as scientists, we know we are integer. There's only one thing that is the truth that we want to find. And if there's a problem, one of the rectors said, they can come to me. If you look now, 20 years later, all universities have an integrity policy, and our judiciary has already 3 codes of conduct. after 20 years. And it's a topic that is on the website. There's always, every year, a week of integrity. So it's on the agenda. And why is that? Just a few words. Why is that? Because that is important to understand the context of what your role is, why we are here, why universities are paying attention to the problem of integrity. And I was inspired by a French historian and philosopher, Pierre-Rosan Vallon, who says, well, there's an interesting change in the democracy, the modern democracy. For a long time, people, once in a few years, they were voting, but they had trust in their representatives, those who represent them in parliament and in the administration. There was a high level of trust in them, and people thought that they were standing for general interest. Now that has changed. Since a few decades, we can see in our democracy that it's changing, and that it's more a matter of distrust. People more and more distrust those who are representing them in the administration, in politics, in parliament, etc. And they are not for the general interest, but they are there for their own interest. They are filling their own pockets. That is what people in the street say, or in the pub. So distrust. And I think that this notion of distrust makes that we are also eager to think about integrity, and that we have to. We can see this we see it back in the interest the media have also for our work at universities, and that they want to have it more transparent, become more transparent. I come back to this idea, but that has an enormous influence on how we look at it. I was asked 2 years ago to advise one of the rectors in a terrible case in which a professor had done things wrong, but not that wrong that he had to be fired. But they did. Well, the professor accepted because of a special regulation, but he had made a mistake. But I advised, but this is not a ground, not a reason to fire him. That's too severe. But then the rector said, but I'm sorry, I think we have to, because of the media. Otherwise they will say that we are not taking this problem serious. The problem had to do with the relationship of this professor of about 50 years and a young PhD candidate of, let's say, 25 years. And they had a relationship, and it went wrong. And I said, well, we don't want to be accused of protecting the professor against this young student. That is the influence of media. That's a negative example, but I want to look at all the problems from a more positive side and say, well, let's take it serious, and let's try to prove our practices. Let's try to prove our practices. Now, we see a lot of changes in the research, in the field of scientific research. The changes of researchers on the shop floor, more and more researchers came in the past 50 years at the universities. There are changes for the administrators of universities. They have to, they are made accountable for the whole policy in the universities. And that is what they feel, because there are all kinds of evaluations of the work at the universities, and therefore they are accountable if the things are not going that good, and that can cost a lot of money, because the ministry can decide not to fund everything of the university. So that is what we see there. The research funds very important to have the money for research. You have to ask for subsidies from research funds. They are in many countries. There are lots of amounts to find there, but they want to spend the money to the best researchers. But who are the best researchers? So there's an enormous competition over there. Universities are asked to work together with society and societal organizations and companies to have extra finance, but also because we think that universities do have a social role, and they have to show that research and the outcome of research has some social value, some extra value for society. And then, as I said already, public space has been changed a lot, and we have the social media, we have the newspapers, and they are looking from a critical point of view to what happens in politics, but also in science. Now, all these changes can cause tensions for the scientists. They have to try to get to extra subsidy. For that, you must come with top work, top papers, etc. And to have a good job in university, you have to have extra subsidies, and if you want to work together with social partners, they also have their interests, and so that can be also cause some tensions with regard to your own independency and impartiality. So tensions. Now what do we see? And now I come to my own experiences also. What is the problem? Is it fraud? Is it fraud? Is it falsification? Is it fabrication? Is it plagiarism? Plagiarism is a serious thing. Many cases I've dealt with on the plagiarism. But it's seldom that there is a clear case of fraud in the sense of fabrication and falsification. Falsification, yes, now and then, but fabrication, we had a scandal in the Netherlands, the Stapel case. Those who are in psychology will have heard of him. Diederik Stapel, he fabricated lots of data, also of which was the PhD used, and it was all fabricated. It was all from his mind. He said that he visited schools and observed children. After years, it appeared it was nonsense. He never visited those schools. Interesting, by the way, and then I have to continue, but interesting is that it took years before this came out. PhD candidates had already seen that something was strange, that there was something wrong with those data. And then they reported it to its Ombudsman, to the rector. You know what the rector said at the beginning? Who are you? Oh, PhD candidate. Who are we talking about? The internationally renowned professor Diederik Stapel. Please, try to do your dissertation first, your promotion, and then we talk again. So it took years before it was discovered because we did not take it serious. And then it were 5 PhD candidates that again reported to the rector, here's something wrong, and then they started to look at it. As I said, I have been chair of the LERU, and interesting is if you look to the advice paper we wrote, that we think that it is very important to put emphasis on the responsibility with regard to integrity and integrity issues of the universities as an organization. For a long time, we were thinking in terms of virtues, responsibilities of the individual researchers, but it's more important to recognize that the organizations themselves have a very, very important responsibility here. Now, what we said is that the universities should empower sound research. Now, well, that's of course. For that, maybe education of researchers is very important. I come back to it. The question is, should it be mandatory or voluntary? To ensure also that the guidelines for how to do research, for example, on authorship, on plagiarism, that they are put in place, that people know about it and can work with it to improve the way they work. Be also transparent and accountable. You all know about open science. Why is this important? As I said, fraud seldom happens. Most of the time. I've done many cases in 20 years. I've seen a lot. Most of the time, the complaint we thought was not grounded, but what we saw in the commissions, that there was always some sloppiness, some negligence. It could have done better. There were mistakes in the statistics, but not that severe, and more matter of negligence than of willfully doing something wrong. Now, what should happen? What should be done? Of course, a lot of can be done by improved supervision and the guidance of the, for example, the young researchers, especially those young researchers. It often comes forward that young researchers have the feeling that they are not well supervised. I give you one example. A large laboratory with several PhD candidates working on a special disease, doing research. One of them came up with a complaint to the leader of this research. And what was the problem? She had made mistakes in her research, methodological mistakes, and that is what the publisher of the paper that she had sent to said, well, no, we cannot publish. And then she said, well, this is the fault of my supervisor. He did not do his work in the proper way. Because I understood that what I have done was okay. It was not okay. And so there was a complaint. And then the supervisor, when he was heard in the commission, said, well, I'm busy, that's one thing, so I cannot have a look that thorough as maybe it should be, is necessary. That's one thing, busy, but also the one who is financing this lab, that was also one external financer, wants to see now and then something interesting as an outcome. Why should they continue financing otherwise our research? So now and then, so outliers, well, leave it. And so that was, but this leader of the research decided to set up a new way of working in which every Monday morning they start with an overview of what everybody has been doing the past week, and if there were several questions or problems with doing the research. Education, very important, we say, but what kind of education? Courses on integrity in general, boring. What is very important is that education on to prevent sloppiness, that it is integrated in also the way teaching methodology of the research, in concrete and analysis. One example, I had to deal with a very heavy case on imaging. There were false images in, and it appeared after a thorough research that, of course, there are mistakes and there are false images in biological research, cell biology it was. That happens. But in this case, there were so many mistakes that we said, well, this is that negligent that it becomes unacceptable. And now what we see is that in the faculty of medicine and biology, the PhDs are trained in imaging. What kind of photoshopping is allowed and when no longer. That's important. Statistics. Social scientists, statisticians in the faculties of social science complain about the statistical analysis. That's sloppy. One example, it's very important, a very good statistician, he got time from the university, one and a half day per week, to advise young researchers on statistics. Voluntarily, they were asked to send in their papers, their concept papers, and he was looking to it and gave advice. You can do it better this way or that. That's important. Guidelines. Yes. Authorship. Many cases of authorship partly could be prevented, although it's difficult to find, because every discipline has other rules of, but it is important. And sometimes I know of cases in which the professor said, well, put my name on it as an author, because that will help you to pass the review of the publisher, because they know me as a good researcher. He did nothing in the research, almost nothing. But if we want to prevent this, let's have guidelines so that also the young researchers know about it. We had discussion already on plagiarism. That can be helpful also to give some thumb rules, what to do, what not. Administration. What can the administration do to improve integrity? There's enormous pressure on results because of the H index, and there's now discussion going on also in my country. Can we change the culture so that it's not only the H index that is the criteria by which we look to the quality of the work of researchers, but also other things. Not everyone is, in Dutch it is a Willy Wortel, but is that genius that he will come up with very interesting and new things, but very good teacher, etc. That should be awarded also. Work climate can be improved by guidelines, if it's possible, produce them to also to improve teamwork, because it is teamwork. Make sure that people can come together and have discussions, etc. Also on problems. This morning, I think that was Professor Schreiner talked about leadership. What kind of leaders do we need? That is where you can look at, invest in personnel. Of course, we need top researchers. But the top researcher is not always the top leader of a group. That is, it can be, but it's not. And that is how we look to it in the past. But more and more we also have an open eye for having people who can keep the group together. And I did an advice for a very, very big hospital in which there were serious problems. And there I saw the difference in culture of the divisions, large divisions. There were large divisions led by very good medical professors and practitioners, very good, but there was an unsafe feeling in the group because he was very dominant, had no time for discussion, to your work. Others were much more willing to have also meetings, discussions in an open atmosphere. If something had gone wrong, no problem, we have to learn from it. And there were serious differences in culture. You can promote that from the perspective of administration. Ombudspersons, you know everything about it. That's important because then people can talk over with others, with an expert if he thinks there is a problem. And have also policy advisors to advise the administration and also to evaluate. Now, handling cases. That's very interesting because in the context of Leary, we had many conferences, and I highlight a few topics that we discussed there and that are still under discussion. One of the things is very important that the one who's coming up with a complaint or the one who has been accused, that they are protected. That is very important. So the one who has a complaint, he must come up easily with it, and the one who is accused, it can be terrible. Can that be done anonymous? No. Never reporting anonymous. Although there are exceptions. If the complainant sends everything to plagiarism, everything to the newspaper, and the newspaper publishes it, then the executive board can still ask, please do a research, because now it's in the public sphere. And now we have to make sure that still everything is fine. And if not, then we have to take consequences. But normally not. I was asked by the rector to do a research in a case in which there was an anonymous professor who came with a complaint to the dean and the vice dean. And I looked at it. But this professor who came to the rector with a complaint, he didn't want to be made knowable to the dean and the vice rector. The complaint was found ungrounded. But it took 3-4 years before everything became a bit normal in the research group in the faculty of social sciences it was. Because the rector said, or the dean and the vice said, who is it amongst us who's not willing to come to us to complain with a complaint? Then we can have a discussion on it. So there is someone here who is not open to us. But who is it? Who is it? Is it him? Is it she? That was terrible. And they still, when I meet them again, they come back to this awful situation. Fair procedures. Let me take one or two things out of it. Most important, Very important is the question with regard to publicity. This morning already we discussed the importance of confidentiality. Keep it confidential. That's important for the ombuds persons but also for example, those who handle the allegations. Now, if you look internationally, there are two camps. One camp said, keep it anonymous. If you publish advice is what we do, then anonymize them so that later on the one who has been accused can still go on with his work, or this university or another university, have a new chance, but then his name or her name should not be known. But there are others who say, well, naming and shaming, somebody who did something wrong, we have to make it public. Sweden is an example. In the UK, it's an example of which they look at it this way. Now, one other issue, and that I just mentioned it, and then I stop. One other issue is about when handling allegations. Should there be a possibility to go to another level, to a higher level? In the Court of Appeal, we decide upon cases of the district court, and our decision is the one that has to stand. But do we want to have that? Lots of discussions are there in the. There are, for example, Denmark, where they now have a disciplinary tribunal for the more severe cases. Problem with that is that it takes a long time, and the problem of juridification, that it becomes more and more a matter of lawyers. Talking about lawyers, often the one who is complained, for example, a professor comes with a lawyer, and a PhD candidate, he cannot afford to have a lawyer. He comes alone. Should universities give support to the researchers if they are involved in a case, to have some support by a legal advisor, a lawyer? Some universities try to solve this problem by having special ombudspersons for the one who's complaining or the one who is accused. That's also a possibility. To end. The Ombudsman, working to both sides. To the shop floor, you have contact with the researchers, but you also can have contact with the administration. What do I mean? You have an intermediary role. The Utrecht Ombudsperson for Research Integrity had several contacts, but one year there were 12 PhD candidates from the medical faculty of medicine. Well, they have each year 400, so you can say, well, that's not such a big number, but still, the ombudsperson thought this is too much. They were all complaining about the working pressure, because they also had to do the medical practice, and beside that, the research. And they thought, we have hardly time to do our research. And then this, and he was a strong person, this ombudsperson went to the executive board of the university, and they had, after that, discussion with the dean of the medical faculty on this problem. And this made that there were several conferences organized. How can we work in another way? Because this is not what we want at our university. And this was the work of the ombudsperson. And that is your role. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Ton. I think this gave many examples of the problems and how important it is to maintain trust in science, because all this comes out now very quickly into the media also. We have to be aware of this, and selection goes into the direction of these characters which fight for themselves and not for science as such. I think we are late now. I think it stimulated discussions, and maybe we say one question and then we go to the next talk, and when we can discuss then also in the coffee break afterwards. We have another one, that's luxury. And I think not to be too far behind the time. It's one question, please. Ja.
Ich verstehe Deutsch und kann es auch ein bisschen sprechen.
We have chance to talk. There's one. No, I can't see. Yeah, Helga. Leute.
It's not a question. Not a question, just a short comment. And you were talking about the training, and you said training or teaching integrity is boring. And I just want to say I do not agree. Because finally, of course, you always have to give examples related to practice. But it's not enough to teach only the technical things like methodology and statistics and so on. But integrity, teaching integrity is a very important thing, but you always have to find examples, and you have to relate it to the practice. And the second thing is, who do you teach? What is the target group? And only teaching PhD students is definitely not enough. Also, the others have to be taught.
I fully agree.